for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. She is a Chief Strategy Officer, DNS Executive Career Management, no other than Miss Michelle Merritt.
Hi, Daniel. It's great to be with you.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Michelle, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes, my name's Michelle Merritt. I am the Chief Strategy Officer with DNS Executive Career Management, where we guide executive leaders through the job search interview and salary negotiation process, along with building resumes, LinkedIn profiles, all of those pieces. We do the same for those seeking paid board appointment.
Miss Michelle Merritt, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom
Absolutely. I'm excited about this. I love books, so I
today.
didn't
Wow,
always love
definitely.
books, so this is really this is a stretch for me. I am excited.
Awesome. So, Miss Michelle, you mentioned books were not a regular part of your home growing up. Can you point or can you paint a picture of us of what your relationship with reading was like as a child?
Oh my gosh, it was so challenging. I was not a strong reader as a young person, and I read books. We were a very active household growing up,
Yes.
so we were always expected to be outside. We were always expected to be physically active, things like this. And reading just was not it just wasn't a priority. It wasn't that we didn't know how. It wasn't as much of a priority for my parents, especially. My parents are very active even well into their retirement. And when I always tell the story that when I was in 8th grade, just wrapping up the 8th grade, we had the end of the year exams and school like statewide exams. And on back in the 80s, they used to post these scores publicly. They would never think to do that today, but um, and they posted the scores, and I had the equivalent of a 5th grade reading level in the 8th grade. And I was very popular. I was a junior high and high school cheerleader, dance squad, all of those things. Very outgoing. Everyone knew me. But here was this what I perceived at the time to be a deficiency, that everyone suddenly knew about, and it caused immense anxiety for me. And even from the time I was much younger than that, having to sit down and read a book. Say, I remember in kindergarten watching the person next to me who knew how to read before I did. Every time she flipped a page, I flipped a page. Like, I learned to mock people very quick, like model people's behavior very quickly.
Mhm.
And so it became this real challenge in my life that I was sort of hiding from people. And it wasn't until I was 30 and in the corporate world that someone I reported to when I was a recruiter pulled me aside one day and said, I think he said, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but I'm sensing that you have trouble reading. Is that true? And he sort of brought that out. And I said, I admitted that it was true. And he said, I'd like to help you with that. I think that I can really help you be a better reader. And I think that will make an impact on your life and on your work. He was right. And so, we put a plan together that allowed me to read, kind of guided me through reading a book a month back then, things like that. Finding things that I cared about reading, learning to read out loud to the cat when I was at home, as silly as that sounds. But we all know that programs like Pause to Read in children's libraries are great because pets are not judgmental when we
Yes.
talk about reading. And so I went from this high school student with a 5th grade reading level, hiding that, to really becoming an adult and an executive who can't put down a book. But all of that really was changed because someone who cared about my professional development pulled me aside very quietly and just said, Hey, I think something's up. Let me help you.
Hmm. Interesting, Miss Michelle, and congratulations for being you. And fast forward to your successful recruiting career. How were you managing your reading challenges in the workplace before your boss intervened?
Yeah, I was a scribbler, right? So people couldn't read my handwriting very well. And I would skim things. And I would always talk to someone about I still to this day build exceptional relationships. I am known for my network. And so I would build relationships with people who would just sort of help me fill in the gaps. I became very perceptive about, if I wasn't sure about something because I hadn't read what I needed to read or something like that, I would listen very closely and be able to sort of fill in the gaps around whatever was missing at the time. And again, much like in my youth, I had a fantastic network. I didn't know what networking was in the 8th grade, but I had a fantastic network and I surrounded myself with really smart people and I was really outgoing and I was a friend that people relied upon. So I built this life and this circle around me that always would help me fill in the gaps.
Miss Michelle, your boss quietly asked if you are struggled. What was that moment like for you? Were you surprised he noticed?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised he noticed. I felt like I had been found out. And he, I will say, did this privately. He did not do this in front of a group of people. It was in a goal setting session for the like a year end goal setting session for the following year. And he said, what if we set some goals around reading?
Yes.
And I was just like, I don't know about that. I'm not interested in that. And that's when he brought it up. And so he was very respectful in his approach to it. So I didn't feel trapped. I felt supported. And I think it could have been very different had he approached it in another way.
Mm, definitely. The boss took a significant personal risk and showed a great empathy. What do you think he decided to help you in that way?
A couple reasons. Number one, I think it was in his nature to do that. Also, I was a top performer in the
Yes.
organization,
Mhm.
right? So they were invested in my professional development because I was and still remain today a top performer in the organizations I work in.
Ms. Michelle, can you share a little about the kind of plan you and your boss put together? What specific techniques, resources, or just a dedicated time?
Yeah. So we talked about what I wanted to read, right? Because I just, again, wasn't very interested in reading. So um, one of the things I had just come across a list, which was the top, the most 10 most notable, this was like early 2000s. So the 10 most notable women of the previous century, right? And so I brought up this list. And so we agreed that I would one once a month read a new book about one of these women, a biography of each of these women. So not only did it inspire my reading, and I gained immense insight from some of the most powerful women in the world, but it really gave me a project. And I've always been someone who's really good at a project, right? I love structure around a project. So, okay, I had 30 days to finish this book. And so I would read so many pages a night to the cat,
Mm-hmm.
and because the cat doesn't judge, well, cats always judge, but they weren't judging the way people or humans do. And so we just built this sort of structure in place, and I would check off the goal. I knew exactly which books I was going to read, and it was really powerful.
Ms. Michelle, let's talk about the transformation journey. Improving reading skills dramatically as an adult is not easy. What was the hardest part of the journey for you?
I think the hardest part was admitting that it was a deficiency, right? That
Hmm.
it was something that was holding me back a little bit. We all have those things in our lives that probably are holding us back, and yet we don't really want to admit that, right? We say, "Oh, I've got all these other things covered. I'm doing all these other things well, so therefore I can make up for that." When in truth, being a stronger reader has helped me in a lot of different ways, and not just in getting excited about a book, but also in how I communicate with other people. um, my writing skills improved, and I was a recruiter. I guide people through resume writing, things like that. My writing skills improved dramatically. My coaching ability with executive clients improved dramatically. Later on, I would go on to have another colleague and mentor who, every time we had lunch, he would say to me, "Which books are on your nightstand?" And that was I was expected to come with a list, and most of the time he had already read them. So it wasn't like I could fake it.
Yes.
And so it took me from sort of faking till I made it to really being invested and building relationships with other people around that common ground.
What specific strategies or resources made the biggest difference in improving your reading comprehension and speed?
Mhm. Reading out loud to the cat. I know I keep saying it, but it's so true. I don't think the power of our pets can be underestimated. I know this sounds silly, but for any of your listeners who spend any time in an elementary school or the children's department at your public library, almost all of them offer a pause to read program, PAWS, pause to read
Mhm.
program, and it is because children who struggle with reading can read to a pet, can read to a therapy dog, can read to their cat, to their pigeon, to whoever, right? And their bunny. And they don't judge, they don't question, they don't giggle when someone says the wrong word. You're not going to be nearly as embarrassed when you mispronounce a word. And
Yes.
so I know I keep going back to it, but it really, really made the difference. And at the time, I was single, although I'm married today and my husband would still be supportive of it. Um, if I needed to go back and do that again, I still would feel like that was the key to that point, was reading aloud and ultimately reading to the cat. If the cat got up and left, so be it. I'd just keep reading out loud. But it just meant she was bored with that biography, probably. But
How did overcoming this challenge change your relationship, not just with books, but with learning and information in general?
sure. So I, as you can imagine, what didn't love school. I loved the social aspect of school, but I didn't love school. And even as I moved into adulthood and, worked on certain certifications, things like that, once I became a stronger reader, life got a little easier. Even when it came to things like reading financial reports and understanding our financials and things like that. It just, as things started to make sense, they started to click a little easier. And that just made things, it was less of a challenge and honestly less dread, less angst going into it.
Hmm. Interesting, Miss Michelle. You mentioned overcoming fear and shame. How did you work through those powerful emotions during this process?
Right. So I had to admit it first, right? Like step one is
Yes.
always admitting there's a problem. And someone had helped me by presenting that and acknowledging that problem. So that was the first thing, was really acknowledging the issue. But then just consistency. I believe that almost probably 75% of the answers to life just occur when you show up in the world. You just show up and do it, right? Whatever it is, whether it's something you love doing or something you don't love doing. Most of the time, if you show up for your work, show up for your family, show up for your people, show up for your task, life is going to get better. And I felt that way about learning to be a better reader. It was really about knowing that I had to show up and I had to do it. I made a commitment to myself more than even my boss. I made a commitment to myself. And that was such a vital thing, to just keep showing up and not let myself down, not to mention anyone else.
Miss Michelle, as a Chief Strategy Officer, DNS Executive Career Management, what are your short term and long term goals?
Oh, our short-term goals are to continue building relationships with the outstanding clients that we work with. We guide executives through their job search, interview, and compensation negotiation process, as I mentioned. And we do the same for candidates seeking board appointments. We are not recruiters, but we do build great relationships with executive clients. And I can't say enough how valuable those clients are. And we have continued to grow and we will continue to grow and expand the resources available and the services that we offer to all of those clients.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Michelle, and
Thank you.
looking
Thank you.
forward for more success.
Mhm.
And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be like you?
Oh my gosh. Um, don't the first thing I would say is don't quit, right?
Don't quit. Yes.
I have been called tenacious more than once. Don't quit. If you have a goal, if you decide you need to be a better reader, if you've somehow found found this podcast and you're thinking, why am I listening to a podcast about books when I don't even like to read? By all means, don't give up. I think that there can be a real opportunity there to grow and to really improve yourself. It's just a journey of self improvement constantly. And I'm constantly looking for opportunities to improve and benefit not only myself, but the people I care about.
Yes, indeed. People and looking forward for more success for reading, Miss Michelle, and good luck to
Mhm.
your goals,
Yeah.
and for sure for the advice too, as well. And can you please recommend a book that influenced your journey?
Yeah. So my favorite book of all time is Maya Angelou's Letter to My Daughter.
No, okay.
So one I mentioned earlier that in fact, it's bookmarked with a beautiful letter that my grandmother sent me. But I mentioned earlier that I love a good project. And I think it was 2013, I decided, which was, I believe, if I've got the date right, that's the year after she passed. And I was always inspired by Maya Angelou, Dr. Angelou. And so I decided to read the complete works of Maya Angelou in a year, and it was life changing. There are lots of business books I can recommend to you all. I can tell you all day long about some great books, business books. But if you ask me what my absolute favorite book is, that is it. I read um, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings and just kept going with all of her poetry and all of the books that she had written and pieces that she'd done. And if you're looking to find inspiration and self improvement, I would highly recommend that project.
Thank you for that recommendation, Miss Michelle. And how has his entire experience shaped your views on vulnerability, asking for help, and mentorship in the workplace?
So, I think a couple of things. You said asking for help. What I will say there is even more important than learning to ask for help, which is certainly important. It's learning to accept help,
True.
right? I think
Yes.
so often we can we can ask for help or say what we need, but then when someone provides the help, we're so rarely willing to accept it because we're afraid of what the person may think or what other people may think about us, what it may say about us that we need to accept help, things like this. And I think you come to a point sometimes where you have no choice but to accept the help. And I've had a couple different cases in my life where that has been the case where I've come to a crossroads and the only way I'm going to get through it is to accept the help. And so I think that is one of the biggest lessons for me in all of this is that I accepted the help, that there are really great people in the world who want to help you. Now there are people you need to be cautious of. There's no question there. But
Yes.
there are people who want to help, and accepting their help, you not only help yourself, but you help them in how you validate their concern for you and recognize that piece as well in the relationship.
Miss Michelle, based on your journey, what is the most important piece of recommendation you give to an adult struggling with reading right now?
Mm, keep reading, right? If you don't like what you're reading, if what you're reading doesn't excite you, find something that does. And there's no judgment. Go to your public library. For the record, growing up in the 70s and 80s, librarians were not as great as they are today.
Yes.
That's my personal opinion, but I think librarians are pretty cool today. But the school librarian I had, she wasn't very supportive in that. She really cared about the kids who loved to read and didn't wasn't really interested in helping me find something that I would get excited about. Go to your public library. If you are an adult who is struggling with reading, go to your public library and find a librarian who's going to geek out with you about whatever topic you care about. I don't care if that's fantasy, romance, or some technical guide about about AI. Whatever it looks like for you, find something that excites you and go check out a book.
Yes. Check a book first before you read.
Well, and the other thing I'll add is that I use I download my books from the public library on my phone. I use the Libby app all the time.
Mm, yes.
Um, and I use it from my phone, not my iPad, because I can read a page at a time when I'm waiting for someone. So if I'm meeting someone for lunch and they're not there yet, I can whip out my phone and read a page or two before somebody gets there and put it away. If I'm carrying around my iPad or a paper book, I don't have that flexibility, but I can while I'm waiting on a call, something like that. I can open a book if I know I'm going to be on hold with the phone company for a long time, something like that. I can whip out a book and it's really easy because it's on my phone, not my iPad.
Definitely. And what role does your book club play in your reading life now? Is there a social aspect that you particularly value?
So I had a book club for a long time that I was a part of. I've since left the community there and left the and moved away, but I was part of a book club for many, many years. And these women were wicked smart and they were avid readers. So it pushed me. We
Mm.
called the book club Wine and Words, and we always reminded people that wine came before words for a reason. So, and I think there are lots of wine and words book clubs out there probably, but these women are to this day. I just sometimes have to log in remotely, but these women are still today dear friends. We bonded over reading. I have some friends now in the community where I live here in Indianapolis where we still connect over books, but the community I had in my last city was we not only bonded over books, but we bonded over just life, having those connections, having that common thread, having discussions, sometimes heated discussions, sometimes arguments about a book was okay. It meant that we were all passionate about it and we were there to support one another.
Definitely. And Miss Michelle, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to
Mhm.
please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because where are my podcasts, which is not
Mhm.
available right now. And my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in its fourth season, and my baby podcast, Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in its fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Miss Michelle, if you could go back and talk to your younger self struggling through high school, what would you tell them about the future?
Oh, that it just gets so much better, right? That gosh, there are so many opportunities ahead. Just again, show up and keep going. I'm so proud of who that young woman was to that point, and all that she'd been through and all that she accomplished. And I would just say to keep doing it. it makes me emotional because I think, just again, just showing up, continuing to show up for yourself, for others, for your community, for your career, all of those things. Um, just don't quit.
Yes. Don't quit, people. If
Mhm.
you have the passion or talent for something, show to the world, just like Miss Michelle and I. Miss Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank you,
knowledge
Daniel.
and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your projects, your business, or anything that you're doing right
Mhm.
now?
Absolutely. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me, Michelle Merritt, on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to connect with me. But check out our website as well, dnscareermanagement.com, for anything that we can do to help guide you through your career and board leadership journey.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Michelle Merritt because if you support her, for sure, more and more and more empowering advocacy to come, more and more empowering business to come. So, Miss Michelle, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.